Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. Today we are reviewing the debut record from indie pop artist Arlo Parks entitled Collapsed in Sunbeams. Now this is an album long in the making. There have been singles leading up to this for the past couple of years, and I really got my first exposure to Arlo Parks just recently, and I instantly was just blown away by her. It definitely took me a little while to process this album. There's a lot of storytelling, there's a lot of interconnecting narratives, and even though it does feel more like an anthology where it's more of a collection of unrelated stories, they all kind of carry similar themes, and it definitely took me a while to process this. I definitely had to listen to this a lot more times than most other albums I review, but it just felt so much more impressive the deeper I looked into it. Arlo Parks, despite her youth, not just in age but also in terms of how long she's been an artist, just in terms of that, she is incredible. She is really incredible. Her songwriting is phenomenal, and her choice of production, it's not necessarily the most original, but she pulls it off really, really well. It kind of transcends that point where even though it's nothing groundbreaking, it's just consistently well done, and you can't really fault someone for being consistent. I mean, you don't have to be revolutionarily experimental to be good, and Arlo Parks is a perfect example of that. It's a really engaging narrative album that tells a lot of stories from a very youthful point of view, and I think her vocal delivery that sounds very young, not necessarily childlike, but just young, conveys these ideas really well. You know, if you had a much older artist saying these same things, it may sound a little bit corny or almost a bit out of touch, but just hearing it from her makes it all feel so much more legitimate. There's many stories of generally centered around love, but in terms of how youths display affection or struggle to display affection between each other, and it covers a lot of ideas of romantic dynamics and friendship dynamics, both in the positives and the negatives, as well as feelings as far as mental health goes and being aware of one's own mental health situation. I think the title of this record, which is also the name of the opener on here, it's very, very beautiful, where the idea of collapsed in sunbeams is meant to convey this concept of being in the light and being in this beautiful warmth, yet at the same time being so exhausted from life that you're just collapsed. You are collapsed, you are tired, you are just done with everything, but you still are trying your best to appreciate the great things in your life. You are really just collapsed in sunbeams. It's a very beautiful image that I think perfectly describes how this album feels. And the opener is not really a song per se, but more of a poem, a spoken word piece that's very, very well delivered. It's a great opener to it. It definitely sets the tone for the album, and it just wouldn't feel the same for me if I didn't start this record with that opener. Then we get into the first real track, Hurt. And this single came out earlier last year, I believe, and it is a really great song. It tells a few snippet stories in each verse about just pains that people are dealing with, and it it brings out the idea that, you know, it's not going to hurt forever. You know, you don't always know what to say, you don't always know how to make someone feel better, but just, you know, understand that it's not going to hurt forever. And that's the predominant idea of this track, is just before you can really improve yourself, you first have to accept that it's going to get better eventually. Because if you have that fixed mindset where you think nothing's ever going to improve, then it's going to come true because you believe that. But if you believe things are going to get better, and then as you believe that you work towards it, that's when things actually improve. I also love her vocal performance on here. The chorus is very gorgeous, has a beautiful melody to it. It has one of the catchiest tunes on the entire record, and I think the final verse, which is in uh, a more spoken word delivery, is very, very gorgeous. Too Good is another great track on here. It covers an idea of these two people who are basically in a relationship, but one of them is just too afraid to do any sort of labeling or actually, make any sort of commitment to it. Where, she's saying, alright, this person is great, this person is amazing, but they're too good to be true. You quote Tom York and lean in for a quick kiss, but you still won't admit that you like me. That's the whole sentiment of this song, and I think it's really well spoken. It plays into that idea again of just a youthful, immature relationship, but it feels so real, having grown up in here. I mean, I'm only 18, having seen a lot of friends go through this kind of thing, it is really understandable, and I see this kind of thing happen all the time, especially now where people are so afraid to put any sort of label on things, where people are, talking for months at a time despite, they're kissing and they're making out and they're holding hands and going on dates, but they're not actually official, they're just talking. These weird kind of fear of commitment that surrounds a lot of relationships, and she's kind of just calling it out here, it's like, you're too good to be true if you won't even admit that you like me. I think it's a really, really interesting story, and again, it's got a great instrumental to it. I think the acoustics are amazing. I think there's some vocal harmonies in here that work really nicely. It's a great song. Hope is one of my favorite tracks on here for sure. It's very similar to the song Hurt, both in structure and in style, but I can't really complain. It's a great song. It's again tells a few different snippet stories within the verses, but this time, instead of emphasizing how it's gonna hurt, she's emphasizing how there are people who are there and there's people who understand, that you're not alone in your pain, and other people share your experiences and can support you through them as you're dealing with them. It's a very, very inspiring song. I love the lyricism on here. It might have been a bit better structurally if it had been placed right after her, just because they are so similar, instead of having Too Good kind of wedged in between there, where I think it fits more thematically with other tracks later on. But it's still a great song, so structural inconsistencies aside, it's really, really good. Caroline is another gorgeous track. It's much more stripped back. Not quite as stripped back as some of the songs later on, but the vocal harmonies on the chorus are just phenomenal. I love her vocal performance on here. It is just so incredibly engaging, where this whole story that she tells here is kind of an outside perspective, where she's looking in. Basically, she's at the bus stop and she sees this couple starting to fight, and they break up. And it just kind of conveys the melodramatic anxiousness that is conveyed here, where the girl breaks up with him and he's saying, Caroline, please, I swear to God I tried. I swear to God I tried. Where he's thinking, I did everything I could, and she's thinking, no, I'm done with him. And we never really get the full story on both sides, but I think that makes it better, ironically. Where you don't really have the entire picture, but you have this outside perspective from someone else looking in, where maybe he did something horrible and she should have left him. Maybe she's overreacting and she's being, very toxic and damaging him emotionally. We don't know. And I think that makes it all the more interesting to ponder the whole narrative going on here. And there's a lot of nuances to the story as well, where he kind of just spirals down, where, he eventually just kind of gives up. He spills his coffee, he calls out to her in anguish, and then he kind of just accepts his fate, rolls a blunt, and puts his head between his legs. It's a very interesting narrative that I think is conveyed gorgeously, and again, that chorus is just phenomenal. Black Dog is another beautiful track. Again, structurally, I wish this album maybe kind of split the themes up a bit more evenly, or instead of kind of having, like a relationship and then mental health and relationships and mental health, maybe it kind of kept the mental health tracks together and the relationship tracks together, but at the same time I think it plays into that youthful energy that I was talking about earlier, where your mind is just kind of all over the place. You haven't really grown into your thoughts fully. You haven't really developed that strong cognitive abilities like you do when you're much older, and your mind just kind of wanders all over the place. And that doesn't mean, like that anyone under the age of 30 is stupid. That's just kind of how that relative immaturity works. I mean, I can even say, like, I know I'm like that a lot of times, just my mind just going all over the place just because I'm not quite focused in on anything. But anyways, getting back into A Black Dog, I enjoyed this song quite a bit. I love her kind of higher-pitched delivery at some parts of the song. It does feel very reminiscent of Billie Eilish, which I wasn't a huge fan of how similar it was, but it's just little parts of the song that are like that. It doesn't ruin the song for me at all. Great melody, great acoustics on here. It talks about essentially just dealing with mental health and wanting to help someone through it, but it's really terrifying because they're trying to get better and they're not. And it's kind of the fearful projections of the person helping, which I know for me I can relate to because I have a lot of friends who've dealt with mental health issues, and it's very difficult to feel powerless in that situation where you just can't help them and you feel afraid because you don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to react, and it's scary. It can be very scary. And I think this song conveys those feelings very, very perfectly. Green Eyes is the following track, which is another really gorgeous one. It's not nearly as stripped back, bare bones acoustic and gripping like Black Dog is, but it is still a very, very great track. It's actually one of the bouncier and more upbeat cuts on here, but narrative-wise, again, just absolutely stunning lyricism. The whole narrative going on here is that she is in a relationship with another woman, and this girl that she's with is constantly fearful that she's going to face judgment and ridicule from the outside world. She's already received a lot of ridicule from her parents, her dad even saying that he felt like he had lost her, which is a horrible thing to say to your child, especially over something like this. But it's a very compelling narrative where she's just, and it's very sweet also. It's bittersweet because she says, like, we only lasted 2 months, but I understand why, and I don't blame you, darling. Like, that's such a beautiful line, I think. It's just, things didn't end how I wanted them to, and things didn't last as long as I would have liked. But, it's just, I can't blame you, darling. It's a really, really beautiful line. It moves me a lot every time I hear that, and the more I think about it, it's very, very compelling. Just again, that I could never blame you, darling, because it's so sweet, it's so loving, it's so empathetic. There's so much power to that, but there's so much understanding there. It's like, yes, all right, we can't be together right now, and I understand that, and I can't blame you, darling. They're coming for us. They're coming for blood. But I could never blame you, darling. It's just such a moving line. It almost leaves me speechless at points. It's just so beautiful, I think. Easily one of the best cuts on here. A part of me is kind of sad it came out. I forget if it came out in 2020 or 2019, but that means it's not eligible for my best songs of 2021 list as much as I would have liked it to be, because it is just such an amazing cut and debatably my favorite song on the album. From here, we do get a bit shakier. I do think the track list is a bit less consistent towards the latter half, but still very good. Just Go is got a earwormy, catchy instrumental. The lyrics are pretty standard stuff where, like, some obsessive ex is showing up at your door, all upset over it, and it's like, just go. Why don't you just go? get out of here. It's not as quite as emotionally compelling as a lot of other songs on here. It's got an earwormy hook, but the instrumentals are nothing all that special. It's a decent cut, but nothing amazing. For Violet is one I definitely see the appeal to. It's very spacey, it's got a great atmosphere to it, but I just can't really get behind the rhythm on here. I like the lyrics of kind of questioning whether a long-distance relationship will work while putting on that facade that you're saying, like, oh, it'll definitely work, you'll go off to college, you'll do this, you'll do that, and things will be fine. But I get these vibes from just the tone of her voice and the atmosphere of the music that there's a lot of doubt in there that, maybe things won't be fine, maybe things won't work. But I just wish the melody was better to the verses here. Although her spacey vocal performance on the hook is quite nice, I do have to give credit there. It is a decent song, and I do enjoy it overall. It's just not one of my favorites on here. Eugene, though. Eugene is a great cut. It's probably my favorite cut from this last little segment of the record. It's a very bouncy one, relatively. It's catchy, it's really fun, and the lyrics are, again, very striking, very emotionally gripping, where she's essentially reflecting on her falling in love with a close friend. She says they've been friends since they were 13, they've been friends for years, and this person that she's in love with, she's in a relationship with another guy, and she's, comforting her when the guy breaks up with her, and then she gets back with him, and he's abusive and toxic and unhealthy for her. And this whole time, Parks here is just in love with this girl. It's a really gripping story, again, that I don't think it would have worked from someone older. Where she's saying, I know we've been mates since like years ago, it's like, but she's still just so madly in love. And it's like, I know I've been acting weird. I want to get the exact lyrics on here, It says, hey, I know I've been a little bit off and that's my mistake. I kind of fell half in love and you're to blame. I guess I just forgot we've been mates since day. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Very, very great lines there. It's just kind of admitting, like, yeah, I've been acting weird, but, and the line, I kind of fell half in love and you're to blame, at first struck me as a little bit weird, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, where she's not necessarily blaming this person in a negative way, but it's like, you've always been there for me, you've been doing so much for me, and you've shown so much affection to me, how could I not fall in love with you? You are so amazing. I kind of fell half in love, still unsure of her feelings, but still kind of admitting to them. I kind of fell half in love and you're to blame. And it's a very emotionally potent song, and definitely a powerful one on here. And again, that higher registry vocal delivery is very, very beautiful on the hook here. So Eugene, great song. And then the last two tracks were not some of my favorites. Bluish was just okay for me. I didn't really care for some of the vocals on here. The lyrics were kind of about a toxic friendship, but they weren't nearly as specific or intriguing as many of the other stronger narratives on here. And the beat just didn't really hit me. I didn't find it all that catchy. I didn't really find it memorable. It was just okay overall. Nothing really special about that track for me. And Porta 400's a decent closer. It's a bit one note. It's a bit repetitive. I think some of the vocal change-ups were kind of just slightly worse versions of things that happened early in the record. It's not bad. It's got a bouncy beat. It's fun. It's not a bad closer at all. And it kind of sums up the themes of the record overall nicely enough. But I don't know. I didn't find it nearly as engaging as other tracks on here, even if I thought it was a decent cut overall. But I know this is a long review, but there's a lot to unpack lyrically here, and like I said, I really just wanted to reflect on this record really in depth before I gave it a full review like this. But overall, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to see how she grows as an artist from here, seeing where she branches off from this bedroom pop, indie pop style, because what she has now is amazing. I love her lyricism. I love her voice. She has some great, simple, yet really catchy production, and enough diversity in the sounds to keep it intriguing, whether it be the stripped back acoustics to the bouncier piano chords. It all works really well. And I'm really loving what she's doing here. A couple tracks, especially towards the end, I wasn't as big a fan of, but still, really, really good stuff through and through. Overall, I'm feeling a decent 8 on this one. If you heard the record, be sure to tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below. Be sure to tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.